Welcome to the Energy Show. I'm journalist Markham Hislop, and the working title of today's show is Energy as a Technology in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. My guest today is Professor Dimitry Anastakis, the L.R. Wilson and R.J. Currie Chair in Canadian Business History at the University of Toronto. So, welcome back to the Energy Show, Dimitry.
Great to be here, Markham. Thanks for having me.
We had a really good conversation the last time you were on, just a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, about Trump's tariffs and the effect on the Canadian auto sector. And since then, we've had some exchanges about the fourth industrial revolution and how the very nature of energy is changing. It's what well still is, but for the last 150 years, it's been a commodity, something you burned, turned into energy, and then into work. Now it's technology, and it fits into this industrial revolution. It's a subset of it, and I think Canadians need to better understand the nature of the technology revolution we're in and how that's going to affect energy going forward, which is a big part of the Canadian economy. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Give us, in layman's terms, a brief overview of that fourth industrial revolution.
Sure, and it's a great opportunity to contextualize this by talking a little bit about the first, second, and third industrial revolutions and how we get there, because this one is different. And that first industrial revolution in the 17th century, which is steam powered, it is a coal mostly that is helping fuel that industrial revolution. You see the beginnings of mechanization, manufacturing. By the time you get to the 19th, end of the 19th, early 20th century with the second industrial revolution, that's where you start to see large scale manufacturing, large scale consumption. Fordism, the auto industry, mass manufacturing through the assembly line. Again, though, that kind of level of automation, production, that kind of shift towards an industrial society away from an agrarian society is underpinned by fossil fuels. It's coal and then it's oil. The automobile, which is really the avatar of the second, third, and to some degree the fourth industrial revolution, is in the second industrial revolution fueled by gasoline primarily. The same thing happens when you fast forward from the 1920s and Fordism's kind of apex to the 1960s, 70s, and 80s when you see this third industrial revolution that emerges that is also one that's built around mobility, particularly around the auto industry. And that's where the Toyota production system makes automation, digitization, computerization, and robotics, and the beginnings of robotics, even more important when it comes to mass manufacturing around the auto industry, but all kinds of mass consumer goods. This is just in time. This is lean manufacturing. This is efficiency. But underlying that step forward, that third industrial revolution, is again a fossil fuel economy where you're burning fuel. Now, you get to the 2010s, and the Industrial Revolution that we're experiencing right now builds upon the third, builds upon the second. Certainly, there's a lot of similarities and underlying aspects, but it accelerates and it shortens the time between industrial revolutions, and it's more impactful in such a short amount of time. And what you see in this fourth industrial revolution that we're all experiencing is obviously higher level computing, AI, even more automation, even more robotics, even better just-in-time practices, and of course, the impact of electric vehicles. And the electricity aspect of this is what differentiates the fourth industrial revolution from the prior three, where you don't have this kind of fossil fuel underpinning, but you've got an electrical idea that fuels so much of what's happening in this industrial revolution. That decoupling between electricity and energy as a commodity, as it once was, versus energy as a technology built right into the industrial revolution itself through batteries, through the kinds of technologies that are powering this fourth industrial revolution is a real shift, and it disconnects and decouples a lot of the important aspects between what happened in the third and second industrial revolution around automobility and what's going on now. The EV revolution is a fourth industrial revolution byproduct that is coming out of this underlying shift in energy as a technology as opposed to a commodity. And that is such a departure that it's going to have implications that we're only really beginning to understand. And I'll just say one more thing quickly, Markham. The avatar in North America for the fourth industrial revolution has been, for the last few years, less so Intel and more so Tesla. And you see that because Tesla has always been identified as being, the cutting edge technology around robotics, AI, computing, the idea of a car being almost like a phone, an IP product that is as much IT as it is about cars. And, that in itself is a great symbol because what fuels all of that is electricity as a technology, not as a commodity. And that's a gigantic shift in how we understand things. And Canadians need to understand that we're in the midst of this and it's going to have long-term implications.
I was interviewing a Kingsmill Bond from, well, he was at Rocky Mountain Institute, and now he's at Ember. But Kingsmill's been involved in this the energy transition world for a long time. And one of the things he made the point is that energy as a technology changes everything because now it's made in a factory. It's not made, you're not extracting it, shipping it, processing it, turning it into some kind of a fuel, which then needs to be combusted and turned into work. And it obeys different laws. So the Wright's law would come Ted Wright in 1936. Airplane engineer discovered that every time you doubled the production of airplanes, your labor costs went down 15%. So we applied that to other manufacturing. We found the same thing held true. So the more you manufacture solar panels, the cheaper the price gets. That's not true of oil, gas, and coal. You can produce as much as you want, and it's supply and demand that basically determines what you're going to pay, and the cost of combusting and turning that commodity into energy in your home, in your car, is not getting any cheaper.
It becomes uneconomic. And the beginnings of this technology, energy as technology. I mean, we've been involved in this, but the acceleration of this in terms of battery storage, efficiency, the types of chemistries that are going to be happening, the kind of kilowatt hours that are going to be in this new technology is going to really shift the way we think about energy in so many ways. As you say, we need an entirely new mindset of how we think about the way energy functions in our society because we've grown up so addicted to a commodity model. It's going to be a real hard thing for Canadians to break through on this mentality. But once they do, it's going to be liberating because, as you say, the ways that energy is going to be understood, forget about shipped, transported, stored, and utilized, is going to that's going to be probably the most fundamental aspect of the revolution. And we're all familiar with the implications of AI and robotics. We can see that in a real world kind of implication. But the energy as technology revolution is something that is even more fundamental and is going to have a wider impact because it's going to implicate and influence every aspect of our society, especially the energy sector, and especially in a country like Canada, where we have so much of our economy tied towards extraction around energy. That's going to change.
China is often described as the first electrostate. So basically, their manufacturing is based around clean energy technology, electrifying the economy. And one of the things that does is speed everything up. So it used to be you started designing your next model of car if you were an automaker 4 to 6 years. It took you to bring it to market. The Chinese do it in 18 months, and we've seen innovation after innovation where nobody expected it, and all of a sudden DeepSeek, their AI model, came out of nowhere, and it uses a fraction of the energy, and it does all the same things, and you could apply that to just about every industry where China is operating, and it's that speed that we don't understand here in Canada. We still think we have lots of time. We have plenty of time. We have no time.
We have no time. We're actually behind. The starting gun was fired a long time ago. And whether you're talking about DeepSeek or EVs or solar, The Chinese are so far ahead of us that, when Mark Carney, who's running for prime minister, says we need to hit the ground running, we have to be fast, we're going to have to do stuff faster than we've ever understood we are needed to do so before. This is what he's speaking to,
Exactly.
because he gets it from a global perspective. He knows what the world is going through right now, and he recognizes that Canadians really need to get up to speed and understand what is going on. And, the Chinese are not resting on their laurels. The competition is there, and we can get left behind, which is what's happening in the United States as they willfully turn their backs on the fourth industrial revolution. And in fact, the Trump administration's policies, whether it's their attitude towards universities, whether it's attitudes towards tariffs, whether it's attitude towards the Biden administration's legislation around the IRA, that is actually turning the clock backward when they need to be accelerating forward. And we, as Canadians, can't be caught in that. We can't. So no matter what happens on tariffs, Canadians really do need to depart from the station with them, without them, I should say, without them, if necessary.
One of the consequences of the way Trump is running his administration, his war on universities, for example, and his war against clean energy technologies, part of it is it's not Americans think of themselves as free marketers, free enterprise, free this. Government doesn't do anything. Mariana Mazzucato blew that idea open, wide open a decade ago. Because what she said is don't listen to them, what they say. Look at what they do.
I
And
do.
what they have done since at least the Second World War is they have industrial policies, but they put them in the university and they put money into research and so on, and they get that technology out off the bench and into a pilot project until the private sector it's de-risked enough, the private sector will take it up and run it. Or they do it through the military.
Military.
DARPA and all of those programs,
Yes,
or the
absolutely.
Department of Energy. The Americans have one of the most robust and innovation systems. They have the biggest innovation system in the world because they have industrial policy. And Trump is attacking it at its very root. He's the institutions that support that, the departments and so on, he's taking them apart. He's
Capitated
dismantling
them.
them.
And it's amazing. I've been calling it for a long time now the greatest own goal in economic history. It's an act of Harry Carey, and you nailed it absolutely. Eroding the universities, dismantling the government agencies that are at the forefront of innovation and have led the American empire to a point where it is a country that could put a man on the moon, et cetera, et cetera. And now we see in real time this rapid decline and collapse by choice. By choice. So, the Chinese have been thinking about the Americans as competitors and doing all this stuff because they've really thought of this as a direct kind of confrontation. And now we're in a situation where a Trump has basically waved the white flag. And the Chinese are celebrating in Beijing because they realize, hey, they've left the field open to us. And all of those advantages that the United States have had in the post-war period, the universities, the industrial policies, the kind of soft power goodwill that they've been able to take advantage of, the incredible attractiveness of the American economy because it's been so open by and large. Yes, there have been moments of protectionism. All of that is being squandered in a way that is just so destructive. And, the one thing I always say about the United States, one of the reasons that so many car companies are there and it is such a vibrant market is because the United States, there's been a lot of rhetoric, as you pointed out, but in the real world, there have been many, many car companies who have come into the United States market and done very well. Honda's done well, BMW's done well, Toyota's done well, in part because the United States has been open to this. They've been willing to compete. They've gained the benefits of this. One of the key aspects of the third industrial revolution was the fact that it came out of Japan through the Toyota production system. And it required the Americans to catch up, and they did. They were open to this. They had Japanese companies come to the United States. They did joint ventures. I mean, the Tesla plant in Fremont is the remnants of a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors in the 1980s as the Americans tried to catch up. But now they've changed their approach where it's all tariff walls. So instead of having an open economy that allows them to innovate and gets the best ideas from around the world, they've put up walls. And that kind of protectionism has left them further behind than at any time that I can recall. And it's a shame because, in some ways, it's really un-American to use these kinds of protectionist policies. So he's doing the exact opposite of what's best for his own country's trajectory and kind of framing it as pro-America. This is really the worst kind of America first policy I can imagine.
I often give presentations to oil and gas audiences in Canada, particularly in Alberta. And one of the points I make is that OPEC's modeling, which shows significant oil demand growth out to 2050, is based on the assumption that the global South, so we're talking Latin America and Africa and Asia, non-China Asia, that's where all those emerging economies will account for almost all of the demand growth out to the middle of the century. Because they want middle class lives just like North Americans and Europeans enjoy. And the problem is when Biden did this, and Trump has just amplified it. When Biden put up the 100% Chinese EV tariffs in last May, all he did was take China and China's huge manufacturing capacity, and they said, "Oh, we'll just go over here to the global south, and they'll open up, and they've welcomed us with open arms, and we'll just not only will we export EVs and batteries and all of that good stuff, but we'll start localizing our manufacturing there. BYD will put a plant in
Yes.
Brazil and
Yes.
Turkey and Vietnam and all of those kinds of things. They've left the rest of the market that's growing, only going to grow, and they've left it to China.
They
Was
left each other.
huge strategic error.
And the upshot of this is if you're going to predicate the idea that oil growth is going to happen in these other markets because you're assuming that they're going to buy internal combustion engine vehicles, you are dead wrong. This is
Yeah.
like saying, hey, you know what? We're going to plan a model of telephony and telecommunications where it's going to be all landlines. And then you just miss the cellular revolution. You don't have to put landlines between every town. You could just put up some towers. It's way more efficient. It's the same thing with ICEs and EVs. There's not going to be the demand for gasoline on a global basis, even if car consumption goes up and up and up and up and up, because the cars that are going to be built and sold are going to be EVs. And because of the United States doing this own goal, they're going to be Chinese EVs. You're already seeing it in Mexico. And one of the reasons that Biden did place that 100% tariff and we followed suit was because BYD, Build Your Dreams, the most successful EV manufacturer in the world, already has a pretty big market share in Mexico. So, they're basically skipping over an addiction to internal combustion engine cars and going straight to EVs. They're going to grow that, which is going to dampen the demand for oil. So it's a double whammy. If you're going to think that you're going to avoid the EV revolution and the oil gas companies are going to do pretty well because there's going to be a continuation of that kind of demand, you are missing the boat entirely. And, this is something that is harder to see in North America because the EV revolution is coming out slower than it is in other places. And it's harder to see because there's so much of this narrative that is, a kind of a pro
Right.
fossil fuel narrative that really says we can't make the transition, it's too expensive. Well, I'm sorry, but it's happening all around the world, and we are going to be left behind in North America unless we recognize how quickly it's happening, which goes back to your point about speed, and that this fourth industrial revolution is accelerating at a pace that it's not like the first one, which took a century, or the second one, which took half a century, or the third one, which took a couple of decades. This is a decade. In a decade, AI, robotics, and EVs will be a dominant feature of the world. Unfortunately for North Americans, unless we figure our stuff out, and Canadians are going to, I think, depending on leadership, Canadians are going to. But in the United States, if they don't figure themselves out, they're going to be left behind.
One of the things in Canada, we've been arguing this for a while at Energy Media, but one of the things we need to do here is we need to have a different kind of energy conversation. And I was disheartened a bit, I have to tell you, when Trump put on his tariffs, and the first thing that happened, the very first thing that happened, is the usual suspects came out and demanded LNG plants and pipelines. And then some of the premiers came on board, like David Eby in BC, where I live, and that was okay. Maybe we could look at one of those, and then, but I, the problem is that then the usual suspects crowd out any kind of new conversation, the kind of conversation that we're talking about that needs to take place. And there is a mountain of evidence and data and actually scholarship and that's been around for decades that explains how the new process, the fourth industrial revolution, is working, how it's working with clean energy technology, all of that stuff, and is completely and utterly unknown in Canada. And that's a crime, because if we don't understand it and we're not talking about it, we can't then give directions to our policymakers, to our the businesses that in Canada that need to get on board with this stuff, and we will get left behind.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know that you're in Alberta and you know this better than most people, but there's been a narrative since the 1970s about the place of Alberta in the Federation, and that place of Alberta in the Federation is primarily around oil and gas and their ability to make money in the province. And it has had an impact, certainly a positive economic impact on that province. And there's been some consequential impact for the rest of the country. But one of the things that is obscured is that we are constantly only talking about oil and gas as an energy solution because we have this Albertan advantage, which Albertans do refer to as an Albertan advantage, which is fine, and it has been for a 20th century that was fossil fuel oriented. But at this stage of the game, it's obscuring the transition that really needs to happen, and that is happening whether we like it or not. And that narrative, you see it happening right now. Is there's a lot of discussion about what's going on, how we're going to deal with this, and if the answer is the same solution that people have been advocating since the 1970s, which is build more pipelines, get more of it out of the ground, I think we're really missing the boat. And it reflects that kind of obscuring of our narrative that there are other alternatives, energy alternatives, that don't need to rely on a commodity that even some of its biggest producers are starting to move away from. I mean, there's a lot of countries in the world, there's a lot of OPEC countries in the world who recognize that there is at some point going to be writing on the wall. We as Canadians really need to do so as well. I'm not writing off Alberta. I'm not being dismissive of Alberta. So much of that economy is around oil and gas, but I really do dislike this notion of, as you said, as soon as things start to get really hairy, people start saying, well, the solution is build more pipelines yet again. I think we can look a little bit further beyond that kind of narrative.
It's frustrating that our solution to the Trump problem would be to do in the future what we've done in the past, just do it with different customers in different countries.
Yeah.
That's not going to work in this. But let me give you on the subject of Alberta, because I've been involved in the Alberta energy conversation for a long, long time, and I have argued, and we're starting to see this more and more. People are picking up on this idea that the what to do with bitumen. You should never burn bitumen. It's a total waste of a good resource, because bitumen has a very, very unique molecular structure. It's more like a sheet. And I've had chemists at the Alberta Innovates explain this to me. I'm not a chemist. But what they say is you can it's the perfect feedstock for materials manufacturing. So make carbon fiber out of it. And if you got $50 for a barrel of bitumen at a refinery, but instead you turned it into carbon fiber, you'd get $200.
That's
We're
value
leaving money
added.
on the table.
Yeah.
We're leaving money on the table. So at a time when we need to lightweight electric vehicles, when we need to strengthen building materials, all of these things are perfect for carbon fiber. Why are we burning our resource? That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last thing we should do with it.
And the cost of getting that bitumen into a burnable situation is so much more expensive than using it, as you say, in a new way and getting carbon fiber, whatever the case, man. Like, we are leaving money on the table. We're leaving money on the table, and the cost inputs are even greater than that. So I agree with you entirely. There's lots of other ways of thinking about that resource and other ways of thinking about our resources in a world that's changing pretty quickly. You
Well,
know,
that's a question I want to follow up on, Dimitri, because if we're talking about, we agree that the fourth industrial revolution, time is compressed. Things just happen much more quickly than they used to. What that means is that the 5 year, if we think we have time to 2030 or 2035, how much can change by 2030 or 2035? I mean, what will China do? What will the other Asian countries like Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia that are following in China's footsteps? In India is trying to follow in China's footsteps. Innovation, new technologies, electric technologies. So we may find we get to 2030 and the gap between us and them is much wider than we thought.
is much wider. And if we make the decision to say, hey, we are going to, look at that old solution of building pipelines and getting more, by the time we get to 2035, we might have spent an awful lot of money to exploit those resources and get to a point where nobody wants those resources because they've all moved on and they've accelerated and been part of this acceleration. So, from the get-go, the idea of, hey, the solution to the problems we're facing right now and in the immediate future, and even in the midterm future, is to build more pipelines. Well, that's not going to solve those problems. And if you're going to make the case that it's for the longer term future, well, I don't even think that's tenable either, because we can see already just how fast the ground is moving, and that these countries are moving away. They're doing everything that they can to move away from a dependence on fossil fuels.
One of the things I've noticed is that, and I talk to oil and gas engineers all the time and other folks who are in the industry. I have never once had anyone, when I challenge them, show your math. Like, if you can cite sources, credible sources that have done research and peer-reviewed research that contradicts what I'm saying, like, lay it on here. Let's have that conversation. And all they have is a narrative. That's all they have. And if we don't change our mindset around what the future is going to look like, and here at Energy Media, our catchphrase is the future is electric. That's that's what it's going to be. If we don't change that, we're going to be in trouble. But we have the potential to change it in a hurry. Our power grid is one of the best in the world. It's 84% clean, it's low cost, it's reliable. It is the biggest competitive advantage we have as an economy to electrify, electrify, electrify. And then we have one of the things that Alberta brings to the table is more engineers per capita than any other province in Canada. It's got a lot of really smart, bright, problem solving folks. And so we have a lot of the raw materials, if you will, to transition into this new energy system. What we don't have is a population that's committed, that understands, and the leadership that understands. And then we're lacking the policy framework and the regulatory frameworks that we need to catch up, because government has to play a role in this. They certainly did in every other place, like in China and South Korea, where they're making the transition. So we stand at a crossroads. We stand, do we go left or do we go right? Do we make the right choice or the wrong choice? The Americans clearly have made the wrong choice. Now we have to decide what our choices are, and we need to make the right ones.
Absolutely. A crossroads or precipice, both are good analogies. Precipice is more immediate and it's more serious in terms of just how demanding. Because, crossroad is, we can go this way, but a precipice is either you jump and you're going to fly, or you're going to hit the ground. And we need to jump and fly. And the things that you mentioned here are all part of how we're going to be able to do it, if we're going to be able to do it. And, I keep coming back to this because, I'm a historian of automotive and automobility. And, there's a constant narrative in North America about the impossibility of EVs, that they're not as good, they're not as efficient, they don't, all this stuff that is just hooey. We're in the middle of this revolution. It's happening whether we want to be part of it or not. EVs are better. They're better for the planet. They're better vehicles. They're better on every measure understandable. And they are, in lots of ways, the symbol of this transition and this fourth industrial revolution. And all of the things that we've just talked about are kind of around that. But, since automotive is so much in the news and you see this kind of dynamic going on, this is why we see this incredible divergence between China, who has really understood where that future is. And, I don't agree with a lot of what the Chinese are up to
Yeah,
and the kinds of
sure.
approaches that they have and politically. But when it comes to their embrace of technology and what they're doing, and I know that they burn coal, yes, they do, but they're moving pretty quickly away from a lot of those fossil fuels. And then the United States, which, has everything that China wanted, had it, and seems to be squandering it in lots of ways. So that's the precipice. You're either going to fly or you're going to fall flat. And we can see what's happening, and Canadians do need to wake up and make that decision themselves as well.
I'll close our interview with this comment, Dimitri, and that is Canada is dominated by incumbents, incumbent utilities, incumbent oil and gas companies, incumbent big corporations, incumbent banks, all of that. And they play an outsized role in our economy because we're fairly small, small and open. That's we've been this way for all 1867. And we need to counter the influence of incumbents and their narrative that things aren't going to change much, and we need to do more of the same that we've done in the past. We need to counter that. And so hopefully some of them will watch this interview and be converted.
I hope so because, to be dependent on a particular path, one that we know is probably not the best future, is not a great thing. And we really do need to kind of switch gears here a little bit and switch directions. And hopefully, this message is going to come out. This is a crisis situation. We're in a trade war. Every crisis does have opportunities. It's a reckoning. You've heard some language from some of our leaders who recognize what's going on and recognize that there's a new game afoot and that we really need to be nimble and quick and fast and take advantage of this opportunity because it's the future and it really is effectively a fight for the future. So hopefully, Canadians make smart decisions about where they want to go next.
Well, there's going to be some paychecks that depend on it. So thank you very much, Dimitri, and we'll look forward to the next interview.
My pleasure, Markham.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.